Hi, my name is Landon Palmer, and I will be discussing the song The Root of All Evil from the Dream Theater album Octavarium. It was a 2005 release, and The Root of All Evil is the first track of the album. The album is a concept album covering the movement through an octave, hence the name Octavarium. The first track, Root of All Evil, corresponds to the root of the scale. So the root of all evil is in the key of F, and Octavarium, the eighth and final track, and also the octave in the movement is also an F. However, it is an octave above what the root of all evil is, albeit in the same key. So the root of all evil is actually part of a larger concept called the 12-step suite, which is a series of songs that the drummer of Dream Theater, Mike Portnoy, wrote as kind of a healing process, but then also just covering his experience with the 12-step suite, recovering from alcoholism, and his experiences with that. This is the third track in it, in the series, so it's right in the middle of the 5 tracks total that make up the concept over the span of 5 albums, and this one more covers part 6 and 7 of the suite. The 2 parts are called Ready and Remove. It is the shortest track in the suite, and it has some nice progressive moments, but is also a very strong, heavier opener to their next album that this series of songs has covered. So, this track, The Root of All Evil, pretty much discusses just a bunch of different traits and actions and behaviors that were just really not healthy and not good in general. Some of the lyrics say, "Proud enough to call me arrogant, greedy enough to be labeled a thief, angry enough to go and hurt a man, cruel enough for me to feel no grief." So it's really just talking about someone being very selfish and self-centered, not thinking about other people, just really focused on themselves and what they can do to just make life more enjoyable for themselves and really just live a kind of blind and reckless existence. The previous track, This Dying Soul, kind of talked about that a little bit more, at least just like the darker tones of it, and just how much it just conveyed how much anger there was built up over time through this. And now The Root of All Evil is more of a transition from that more angry, pent-up state to a more open and willing state to change and being, ready to remove these behaviors and actions from their current selves to become something better and to improve upon their life. The song does include some motifs or movements that are also found in previous tracks, as well as what would subsequently be future tracks for this saga that Dream Theater created. Some of the lyrics, they begin to say partway through, "Won't you take all of me, heal this dying soul?" The previous track in this saga is called This Dying Soul, and there are not only certain lyrical notions, but there are also musical movements which I will point out when I play through the song, and I'll pause it and explain those parts more in detail, or explain them more fully in the context of the song after it is played through, or played that part more specifically. So I guess with that being said, I will start the track, and we'll see how it goes. So yeah, the recording, the audio might be not as high quality just because, okay, that's another thing that I'm going to talk about. The recording might not be as high quality given the limitations that I have, so please bear with me. But the first thing that I'll pause and discuss, that F that you heard on a keyboard, on a piano played by their keyboardist, an F, is the very start of the album, and that is in itself is another continuation. Dream Theater was, at least in the early 2000s, was very great with just all these little nuggets and pieces of media that their fans could find and just break down and make connections with. Their albums would connect. The end of the previous album would connect to the next album, and they carried that up until this album from their 1999 album, which ended in Static. Their next album began with Static, and that album ended with an E chord playing out, just E major chord playing through, and then it would fade back in for the next album, which was their 2003 album, and then leading into this current album that I'm pulling a song from, it began with, well, that previous album, the 2003 album, ended with F, a low F, being played on a piano, a grand piano, just as you heard now with the beginning of this album, The Root of All Evil. To not disappoint fans to where they would just drop that idea and not really give it a satisfying ending. What they decided to do, especially with Octavarium being the cyclical nature that it is, an octave, this album Octavarium becoming a cyclical notion, they decided to end the last track, Octavarium, with it coming back to an F being played on a grand piano again, and you'll hear a little bit more of just kind of some synth chords and notes being played that also start continuing at the end of the Octavarium track, which in itself makes the album a loop, so therefore the saga of those tracks being connected to one another is now complete. There's no open holes, anything like that. I just thought that would be something interesting to mention and discuss regards to this song. So yeah, with that being said, we'll carry on. So there's some of the more synth sounds that you would hear at the end of the Octavarium track. And you can hear drums coming in early, just off in the distance, and they'll slowly build up. There's the first chord. I should also mention, in the previous track for the 12-step suite, that just da-da-da-da-da-da, and then a discordant sound being played like that on the guitar, that alludes to the main riff, I guess you could say, of This Dying Soul, which consisted of, well, I'll just play it for you. So, albeit a little off, just because I have my bass currently tuned to what this song is played in, which is half step down, so B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, and B, as opposed to B, A, D, G, C. So normally I could just play this open and then play the song, but now I have to be up here, and that's more like it. Okay, so you'll hear that being played. The guitar riff is more like what you'll hear in the song The Root of All Evil, but that is just the little bass lick that is played for This Dying Soul. So that's also kind of alluding to the previous track and just kind of like saying, okay, we're kind of working our way through this and marching on in this 12-step suite. So anyway, let's keep going. There it is again. So before I continue on, I just want to mention that's kind of the main riff that's now been established, where it transitions from just the really heavy riff of the previous track in the 12-step suite to now just the more riff, where it's still a heavier track, but it's not quite as dark and brooding. It's a bit more energized, and it feels almost more hopeful. It's definitely more hopeful than the previous track, but it's not quite as complete as, say, later tracks in this series, where it will feel much more airy and free and open, as if somebody has finally been able to change themselves and recognize that change and feel that change in their lives and see it around them. So yeah, let's continue on. So as we go into the second verse, as you can see, that's kind of the main riff. That's kind of the riff that's now established alongside just the main opening riff. Again, it's a little bit of a reprise to another riff that is also found in This Dying Soul, where it, after performing just the really fast, heavy riff, there's some riffage where it will play, say for example, something along those lines, but it's not quite the same. As you can tell, it's the, instead of, I mean, it's similar enough to where if you knew the song previously from their 2003 release, the previous album, you might pick up on it and think, wait a minute, this is kind of similar. This is kind of like what we had before. So Anyways, I'll continue on. Video's already getting a little long, but I will continue on and just play through a bit and let you hear the song. And if there's something big enough to mention, we'll go from there. Otherwise, yeah, let's keep going. So now we're kind of getting into the chorus. As you can see, it now changes again, and the lyrics are very evident of where we're kind of at in the mentality of trying to overcome addiction and improve and be better. The lyrics say, entirely ready to leave it behind, I'm begging to break free, take all of me. So it's just somebody that's now realizing just the desperation of their situation. They're trying to get out of this. They're trying to, well, break free from it. So let's keep going. So I just want to mention very quickly, now instead of a riff, say, where we're going, moving from E flat, moving from E flat up to an F and subsequent F sharp, just kind of hanging out in this small sort of half step motion. We're now doing a riff similar to what we opened with, albeit slowed down, and now we're just walking through it instead of hurrying like that. Now the tempos seem to slow down, and we're just kind of marching through this line. So now you're getting two notes per, how should I explain this? 2 notes per movement, as opposed to moving through quickly like that. Now you're going there are some cases where it's only one note and you don't hang on the previous note, but it also just kind of adds to the overall feel of the song changing to where it's now, okay, the tempo is a little slower, not too much. Noticeably, it's still a relatively high tempo for this track. So as you can see, playing them about the same tempo, not much really changes with it, other than there's more notes, they're spaced out more. So that and what at least feels like a slight tempo decrease. Gives a little bit different feel to the song, gives a bit more room to breathe before transitioning to other bridges or other sections. Anyway, let's keep going. So, as you can see, my playing probably got a little sloppier there because I came upon this section, which is the reprisal to the previous song, This Dying Soul, where it's saying, "Won't you take all of me, heal this dying soul? I can feel my body breaking. I'm ready to let it go. I can feel my body shaking." That's all lyrics from the track This Dying Soul, where the lyrics state some of those lines exactly, but also just mention, "Won't you heal this dying soul," etc. So again, it's a reprisal of that, and especially the line where you would play or hear, whichever, you would hear so that little octave movement right there, not only does that kind of boost and bolster the concept of the octave for Octavarium, but as you saw there, I played it a little differently. So instead of just going, I moved up a half step and then back down. So I played the octave in B right there, but then I went C to B on the upper octave, which is how it is played, or how the motif plays out in This Dying Soul, where there's a part with the bass that is very clearly heard, especially in that part of the song where it plays just the octave with the half step motion. There's the bass playing a part in E where there's a break where the guitar plays just a simple riff, but then the bass keeps playing. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on tangent, but I feel it is necessary to explain a little bit of the background for some of the reprisals and motifs and movements that are found in this song, The Root of All Evil. So the part that is played on the bass that is very clearly heard would sound something like... something along those lines. Again, with the tuning being half a step lower, normally I'd be playing that up here and go... which I suppose you get the same idea from it, but not quite the exact same line. Regardless, it's another interesting reference back to an older track that ties into this. So there are all these overlapping ideas and concepts that all culminate into a very interesting listen if you are paying attention to these things, or can find these things looking for them, or even if you listen to some of the other tracks that come before or after, beyond this track, you might catch things that link to this. And so you start formulating all these ideas and finding all of these interesting connections that you might otherwise miss. So, yeah, anyways, let's continue. So the reason I only did a little bit of tapping and then proceed to let the song play out. There is a part of the tapping that is quite complex, frankly. It is played by the bass. It's hard to pick out unless you know what you're looking for and you've heard it before. But there's a very high tapping portion, again, showing more of the progressive elements of Dream Theater, not so much just rock and heavy music. We're already 5.5 minutes into the track out of about 8.5. So again, that shows more progressive notions as well. Instead of just a short metal song, it carries on for well over 5 minutes. So anyway, we'll continue on now. Okay, before continuing on to the very end of the song, as you can see there, again, there seemed to be kind of a decrease in tempo. The song feels like it's slowing down, but you're still, as I'm sure you saw, my head bobbing turned into this and doing every other beat instead of just like that, because the drums start to play a more halftime feel. So that's why instead of playing, you feel like you naturally want to slow down and start playing more like. So, yeah, you kind of see that a little bit more. It'll play that through some more towards the end of this track, but there will also be some slight variations for this main riff turned into an outro, where it'll jump up high, and you'll see those variations, and the drums will pick up again. Instead of playing more that slow kind of halftime feel like that, it'll be back up to tempo, and then some variations where you go high. So let's see that. Okay, so a little bit more to break down there at the end. The the riff, as you could see, went a little higher, and it played some variations on the main riff. Also, at the end there, you could hear the piano start to play what kind of felt like an overture, alluding to some other riff, and it makes you think that you're going to go into another part of the song, and this track will just keep continuing. However, of course, the track ends on what else but an F. But as those ring out, the piano plays what is one of the motifs found in the title track, Octavarium. I highly recommend going and giving this album a listen, because you'll hear that track. Well, excuse me, you'll hear that movement in Octavarium from this first track. And there's a couple other instances where that happens again in other songs building up to the title track. But where the song built up, the piano, it felt like it was building up, then it never resolved, where it built up and then it felt like it should have fallen back down into the F again, or stepped up to an F. It just never resolved. It just stayed right there, and it just kind of built up, and then it just kind of fades away. So again, that's also showing that this is only the beginning. This is the start of the journey through Octavarium, through the album, through all these stories, these steps, these motions. I highly recommend listening to that album and diving into it yourself. But that motion does resolve in the title track, Octavarium. But this, since it's just the opening, you don't get that resolve. You don't get that until the end. We're only starting this journey. So that note just hangs and it fades out, and I let it play a little bit longer so you could catch some of those, I guess, nature sounds and like birds chirping and leaves rustling, because that is the start of the next track, The Answer Lies Within. That one's a lot lighter track. It's got some very deep messages just about moving through life and searching for the answer. And so that was a little bit of the negative track that I had mentioned at the beginning, where it's kind of a transitional track, and although you can't really pick out that it's in, say, F sharp, you wouldn't really pick up on that. However, at the beginning of the next track, The Answer Lies Within, that negative track is continued, and you hear a church bell tolling, and that church bell is tuned to what else but F sharp, because now it is transitioning between F and G, between those two tracks. So there is some sort of transitional, but it's very subtle, and you wouldn't think about it unless you were, again, looking for it. Anyway, that is The Root of All Evil by Dream Theater off of Octavarium. Thank you for sticking around for the full 35 minutes now. I did not mean to make this video that long. I apologize for those that have to watch this all the way through. But I really do appreciate you sticking around for it, and I I hope you find this intriguing enough to go and listen to the track on your own and maybe make some other connections or discoveries that I maybe missed, glazed over, or just completely didn't address. So this track is one of my favorites. It's fun to play, for lack of a better term, but I hope this video can give you a bit of background and story on this track and what it is and what it's about. And yeah, so thank you for watching and have a great one.